There's been a lot of news regarding running back usage, so I figured it was time to give you an updated top 24 running backs for this season. Starting off tier 1, we're going to have the same tier 1 that we've always had. CMC, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson. Now with McCaffrey, not much to discuss. This is going to be a running back going into his age 28 season. Really, the only hesitation here is that he is an older RB, because if you look at what he did last season, it's a running back that averaged 120 total yards per game. Currently, Las Vegas sportsbooks are projecting out the Niners to be the number 1 scoring offense in the NFL this season. If you go over and look at Underdog Fantasy Pick'ems, CMC is currently projected out to have higher, lower, about 100 total yards per game. So unquestionably, McCaffrey should be the 101 overall. The main thing is just putting him in his own tier would be a little bit difficult, because we have seen in years past running backs that had similar age 27 seasons to Christian McCaffrey actually take a step backwards at 28, because obviously we know the running back position's a young man's game. Now, a young man is Breece Hall, and we can talk about Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson here together, because we've done it all offseason. We put out the video months ago explaining in depth why you should rank Breece Hall over Bijan Robinson. And now all of a sudden, it seems like a lot of people are kind of changing their tunes on this and agreeing with us. The reason being is you have the clip of this coaching staff coming out, really hyping up the usage of Tyler Algier, acting like Algier is not just going to be a backup running back, but instead he will have a role from a week-to-week perspective. And if we look at both these RBs, we can say that Breece Hall last year was a running back 1. Bijan Robinson last year was a running back 2. Now, of course, Bijan Robinson's situation gets significantly better, but so does Hall's, where you're looking at Breece Hall as a running back that gets a quarterback upgrade, just like Bijan Robinson. You're looking at Breece Hall that's a year removed from the torn ACL, gets a full offseason to prepare here, which is really positive for his catalyst. And also, the Jets make significant investments into the offensive line this offseason, both in free agency as well as the NFL draft. So I've had it Breece over Bijan all offseason. It sounds like most people are turning around and agreeing with me there, but obviously Bijan's not a bad guy to have, given the fact that his own situation is improving dramatically as well. Now let's drop down to our next tier. We're going to look at Jahmyr Gibbs. I actually had a question in the live stream a few nights ago. If y'all don't know, we're streaming every single night, but I had a question saying, like, how can you draft Jahmyr Gibbs round 1 if he's in a committee? Completely understand the sentiment, because you look at Bijan Robinson, you look at Breece Hall, you look at CMC, all these other guys profiled to be 3-down options. Now, my comeback, my response to that was, well, if you're going to look at what you have with Jahmyr Gibbs, while he is in a committee, he profiles the same way that Aaron Jones in a committee did years ago. Austin Eckler in a committee did years ago. Alvin Kamara in a committee did years ago. I'm not sitting here saying that these players are comparable at all this season. Obviously, the other guys are over the hill, but you are looking at a running back that will lose touches to David Montgomery, but he's going to have every high value touch in the form of receptions. Not only will I have the receiving volume, but at the same time, Jahmyr Gibbs has a shot at the red zone role. I mean, everything here comes down to, does this Lions coaching staff continue to give David Montgomery carries inside the 5-yard line, because they split that job at the end of last season? Or do they decide to use Gibbs in the prime Alvin Kamara, the prime Austin Eckler, the prime Aaron Jones mold, where they give Gibbs everything at the goal line? Because if Gibbs, behind one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, where sports books are currently projecting the Lions offense to be the second highest scoring offense in the league, if he gets the goal line role, he can be the running back 1 overall from a full PPR perspective. Now let's move over and let's look at our next tier, guys. Starting off, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley. I know these are the two players that are going to be compared against each other. It doesn't matter if you're on ESPN, doesn't matter if you're on Sleeper, Yahoo, Underdog. They're pretty much being drafted back to back. Now, how I am breaking down Jonathan Taylor to Saquon Barkley is, I think that they are in a very similar boat with certain circumstances. They're both playing in what should be above average NFL offenses. They are both running backs that are playing alongside rushing quarterbacks that have massive size. If you look at the profile of Anthony Richardson and Jalen Hurts, they both provide the same pros and cons to the running backs in their respective backfields. Because Hurts and Richardson can rush the ball themselves, naturally linebackers can't fall down and they can't just completely crash on the running back when you actually have that potential handoff, because Anthony Richardson can take it on the edge. So it's going to provide a bump in rushing efficiency for Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley. But the drawback for this is both Anthony Richardson and Saquon Barkley are running backs that are going to get vultured at the goal line for rushing touchdowns with Jalen Hurts and Anthony Richardson every once in a while. And both Jalen Hurts and Anthony Richardson should have lower checkdown rates overall, so you shouldn't have a ton of target volume for JT or Saquon Barkley. So if we're trying to figure out how we're going to rate these guys against each other, I would just say, okay, Jonathan Taylor's 25, Barkley's 27. We know 27, 28. This is about when running backs begin to hit a wall. So just using that as like a little tiebreaker, we will go with JT over Barkley. And then looking at Kyren Williams, Devon Achane, these are also two guys that are kind of being drafted back-to-back, which funny is, if you look at your regular redraft league, if you look at ESPN, if you look at Yahoo, if you look at NFL Fantasy, if you look at Sleep, it doesn't matter. Kyren Williams is like a round 2 pick, where Devon Achane's a round 3 pick, where it's actually flipped on Underdog. So personally, y'all know I've been drafting on Underdog every single night on live streams. I have come away with a ridiculous amount of Kyren Williams because I prefer him straight up, and I will continue to draft all the round 3 Kyren Williams in Underdog. We're streaming every single night, and I got to let you in on a secret. We've been holding it off, but we're going to make the announcement that I have signed a 3-year partnership with Underdog Fantasy. Could not be more excited about it. We've been partners with them for years and years and years. I'm going to continue streaming every single night drafts. And of course, with this, we have some special things coming your way. If you have ever used code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy, you are going to be getting a special pick'em for this upcoming season. So essentially a free pick'em, CeeDee Lamb more than less than half a total yard, only for Flock users. Plus, if you use code FLOCK on Underdog, you're going to be getting my 2024 rankings, my 2024 draft guide, which drops today. And yes, all you have to do, go to the link in the description, link in the comment section, link in the live chat. Go sign up to Underdog Fantasy. Use code FLOCK. You're going to get my draft guide rankings. They're best ball drafts, so no time commitment at all during the season. It's how I draft hundreds of teams every year. It's how I won $150,000 on Underdog 2 years ago. And yes, how we're going to be sending out that draft guide is if you have a new Underdog account in 2024 and made that $10 deposit with code FLOCK, you should expect an email coming out from either Underdog or yours truly with the draft guide every single week until the start of the season, where you're going to be getting just consistent updates. And yeah, it doesn't matter if you signed up to Underdog a month ago, today, a week from now, you will be getting all those draft guide updates. So link in the description. But besides that exciting news, I'm drafting all the Kyren Williams. Achane is a little bit of a tougher spot, except in your ESPN redraft leagues where you get him at the end of round 3, then take him everywhere. My thing is, we've already seen Kyren have the 3-down workload, where Achane, he was the most efficient running back in the NFL this past season. But also, if you look at his size, it's hard to believe that he can turn into a player seeing 20 touches per game like we saw from Kyren Williams. And if Achane is going to be an elite option in fantasy without seeing that bump in volume, he has to maintain the elite level of efficiency that he had last season. And if Devon Achane carries his yards per carry from his rookie year throughout the rest of his NFL career, he will go down as the best running back in NFL history, which I personally am not expecting. So I'll go with the volume hog in Kyren Williams. Now, dropping down to our next here, we're going to look at Isaiah Pacheco, Travis Etienne back-to-back. Right now, you can get them round 4 of Underdog drafts, taking them there every day of the week. However, in your redraft league, Pacheco goes in the middle round 2, which is a little bit pricey for me. The thing with this Chiefs offense is you have to try to figure out what is the playing style going to be with the addition of Xavier Worthy, with the addition of Hollywood Brown, with Rashee Rice going into year 2. If you think all of a sudden they turn a little bit more into the air it out program that we saw back in 2018, 2019, back when they had Tyreek Hill, then maybe there aren't as many running back points to go around. But what we saw from the Chiefs last season is they were actually willing to slow it down. Instead, they were willing to run the ball, play defense, and have a quarterback that's not going to make mistakes. It won him a Super Bowl. You got to figure out if they're going to go down that road again. But the positive thing with Pacheco is we can confidently say the Chiefs project out, according to sportsbooks, as a top 5 offense in the NFL. And at the same time, there's really nobody else to compete for carries. I mean, right now, Clyde Edwards-Helaire may lose the number 2 job to an undrafted free agent here. Travis Etienne was like a mid-running back 1 last season, and nothing's really changed in this situation. We did have the coaching staff in Jacksonville saying that Tank Bigsby was going to have a short yardage role. So really the only potential red flag that you could have for Travis Etienne is, I don't know, maybe, just maybe, Tank Bigsby steals some touches at the goal line, which right now doesn't look likely. But it is something to keep in the back of your head and wondering if this training camp report matters at all. Now, where I'm kind of planting my flag here right now, and we've been doing it all offseason, is Josh Jacobs versus Derrick Henry. If you go ahead and if you look at where these two guys are going based off platforms, on Underdog Fantasy, Derrick Henry is a mid-round 3 pick. Josh Jacobs you can get in the middle of round 5. I would rather have Josh Jacobs straight up over Derrick Henry at this point. I think it's a very easy spot if you look at the fact that this Green Bay Packers offense should be phenomenal. Jacobs doesn't have the same age concerns as Derrick Henry, where Derrick Henry turns 31 in January. Jacobs, and the most important thing in my mind, is actually going to have the receiving role in Green Bay. This coaching staff came out and said, yeah, you know what? Marshawn Lloyd's missed a lot of time. Marshawn Lloyd's made a bunch of mistakes. Marshawn Lloyd, right now, it doesn't look like he's with great footing with this coaching staff. But with that being said, Jacobs profiles as the 3-down guy anyway. He will have the receiving role, which Derrick Henry just simply is not going to have a ton of target volume. If you're playing in a PPR format, give me Jacobs at the cheaper cost. If you're playing in a non-PPR league, there I think you can go Derrick Henry. But obviously, in your drafts, you're going to have to really consider the cost of these guys. If you're looking at ESPN right now, Derrick Henry is going in the middle of round 2, where Josh Jacobs is going at the beginning of round 4. Please give me the discount with Josh Jacobs. And then our next two guys will be James Cook, Rachaad White. James Cook, very good offense, but the issue is, hasn't been a phenomenal receiving back during his time at Buffalo. They bring in Ray Davis. James Cook also hasn't had a ton of goal line usage. The thing is, obviously you have Josh Allen. Josh Allen's going to come away with double-digit rushing touchdowns. So you have to compete with Josh Allen for rushing touchdowns and now potentially Ray Davis as well. But outside of that, he's the starting running back in a very good offense, still incredibly young, only going to be 25 this next year. And then with Rachaad White, if you're looking at this profile, White was a true bell cow last season. He did everything you would want. He had the red zone role. He had all the target volume as well. I mean, Rachaad White was a phenomenal receiving back here. So the ultimate question is, okay, what do we expect with the efficiency? Because Rachaad White was very inefficient last season. If you think the efficiency looks similar this next year, the ceiling may not necessarily be there for Rachaad White. But if you think the Buccaneers offense can surprise to the upside, and if you think Rachaad White can be a more efficient running back overall, then Rachaad White should actually project to be a lot higher than this based off his role in the receiving game and his lack of red zone competition. They bring in Bucky Irving, but Bucky Irving weighs, about the same as the big high school senior. Now, let's go over and let's look at our next tier of guys. We're going to go over to a veteran. We have Joe Mixon here at 15. If you look at the historical data with Mixon, doesn't look super, super pretty, but the positive that you have is his offense in 2024 should be significantly better than his offense was last year. Very similar to Derrick Henry, which is why you'd rank Derrick Henry, a 30-year-old running back, higher than where he finished in fantasy last season. But Mixon's going to go from a Cincinnati Bengals offense that, keep in mind, didn't really have Joe Burrow last year to now a team that has CJ Stroud. You have limited competition. This coaching staff has talked up Dameon Pierce, that Dameon Pierce looks good, but it looks like Dameon Pierce is playing in the Hall of Fame game, so I don't necessarily know how much validity there is to that. So, it's a safe spot with Mixon. You have an aging veteran running back that's getting an offensive upgrade, but while Mixon's old, he was drafted in 2017. He was only 20 years old coming out of OU, so this is only going to be his age 28 season. Kenneth Walker will be our next guy at 16. If you are looking at Kenneth Walker, very safe pick, running back that's on his rookie deal. Now, one question that you possibly have surrounding the Seattle offense is with the change with the overall scheme, are they going to be a little more pass happy and are they going to run out more 3 wide receiver sets this season? If they're going to be a little more pass happy, probably not a great spot for Kenneth Walker, just given the fact that Zach Charbonnet is the natural receiving back here in Seattle, and it looks like Walker's going to be the more so first and second down grinder. But also the issue that you have with Kenneth Walker is it's very difficult to know exactly what the running back usage is going to be with the new coaching staff. I can sit here and I can say, I think Kenneth Walker is a more talented running back than Zach Charbonnet. I think Kenneth Walker is going to have the role, aka look at me ranking Kenneth Walker ahead of Charbonnet. But it is a possibility in the range of outcomes here where it's an unknown with this new coaching staff that they come in, they bring in a scheme and they go, yeah, under this scheme, Zach Charbonnet is actually the better guy. Both are going to have roles, but instead of it being like a 70-30 split, maybe it's a lot closer to a 50-50 split. And with that inherent uncertainty, I think you have to have Kenneth Walker a tier below James Cook and Rachaad White. Now, going over to Alvin Kamara at 17. So Kondre Miller is a running back that's been a massive loser in training camp. Miller's a running back that sees a hamstring strain. Then the coaching staff comes out and says, yeah, if Miller wants to have a shot to make the roster, he has to learn how to stay healthy, which is very concerning for a running back that didn't manage to stay healthy last season. And if you look at this, one take that you can have is, oh, okay, maybe Jamal Williams has a larger role. Maybe Jamal Williams is all of a sudden interesting. But based off Jamal doing absolutely nothing last year as that aging RB, I think that maybe Kamara just has a slightly larger role overall. Obviously, we know Kamara is going to be getting a ton of target volume from the checkdown princess. It just comes down to, are you playing in a PPR format? Are you playing in a non-PPR league? Because if you're playing in a non-PPR format, maybe David Montgomery is a more intriguing option. Because in that non-PPR format, there you're going to be chasing touchdowns, and there will for sure be more touchdowns available in this Detroit offense than the New Orleans offense. Where right now, the Lions offensive line projects out to be a top 5 unit. This Lions offense, according to sportsbooks, projects out to be a top 3 offense. Everything comes down, and this is something I don't know what's going to happen, right? But everything comes down to the red zone role for David Montgomery versus Jahmyr Gibbs. What you had at the beginning of 2023 was David Montgomery got every single touch inside the 5-yard line. Didn't matter who got the ball down there to the 5-yard line. Didn't matter who got the ball down there to the 6-yard line. This coaching staff went, hey, Gibbs, get out. We're sending Montgomery in. Montgomery's our guy in this range of the football field. Then David Montgomery gets injured. During that stretch, Jahmyr Gibbs has a ton of red zone success. And then when David Montgomery comes back, the new philosophy that this coaching staff has is whoever gets the ball there, you're going to be the guy. I mean, if David Montgomery was in the offense, we get a big St. Brown reception, takes it down to the 4-yard line. They're not throwing Gibbs in. They're not taking Montgomery out. They're just letting Montgomery have it. Vice versa. If Gibbs is in there and then all of a sudden get a big Sam Laporta reception and it gets him inside the 5-yard line, they're letting Gibbs stay in. And that was what we saw at the end of the season. However, my hesitation always is the 21-year-old rookie that they just took at pick 12 will continue to expand his role. The 27-year-old running back is probably going to be a little bit more on the way out. Not saying he's getting phased out. I'm ranked running back 18. Don't get mad at me. But there is that trend you'd potentially have to be concerned with. David Montgomery will have carries here in this offense no matter what. David Montgomery is going to have a role in Detroit regardless. The question is, does that role include red zone opportunities? Because if it doesn't, then what this looks like way back in the day, Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, where Aaron Jones gets all the receiving volume. He gets everything in the red zone. He gets all the fantasy points, and Jamal Williams gets 10 carries between the 20-yard lines for 55 rushing yards. Cool, you helped the offense, but you yourself weren't relevant in fantasy. So the red zone role matters a ton. I don't know what to expect. Just letting you know what happened last year. And I will also say that if you are looking at Montgomery, it is worth pointing out that if Jahmyr Gibbs were to go down, David Montgomery immediately projects out as a high-end RB1. Now, Ramondre Stevenson will be our next guy. Stevenson gets a great contract. I think we can be a little more excited about him because of that. The issue is right now, sportsbooks currently have the Patriots projected out to be the worst offense in the NFL this next season. So even if Stevenson has the role, what's the overall upside with this team? Aaron Jones has been falling a ton in drafts as of late. I know I've been getting Aaron Jones a ton in round 8 of Underdog drafts. Let me see where he's going in ESPN. So ESPN, you have Aaron Jones going at the 5-6 turn. There he is, the running back 18. You actually have some positive camp news coming out regarding JJ McCarthy, saying that McCarthy looks great. Who knows if that's true? Obviously, we shouldn't be putting too much validity into that. Sportsbooks, interestingly enough, don't have this Vikings offense as a horrible offensive line. They have this offense relatively in the middle of the pack, which is nice to see. The thing is, Aaron Jones, declining veteran running back, going into his age 30 season. Team just gave up on him, going to a worse offense. Like, there is a reason he is falling in drafts. Jonathan Brooks will be our next guy. Jonathan Brooks is undraftable here if you're not able to put him on your IR at the beginning of the season. Hypothetically, if Jonathan Brooks goes on the PUP and then all of a sudden your league settings, for whatever reason, you're not able to put him on the IR, you have to put him on your bench, you can't draft him anywhere close to here because he's going to be clogging a roster spot. You're not going to be able to make waiver wire moves. It'd be horrible. But if you can take Jonathan Brooks, throw him on your IR, and he's not wasting a waiver wire spot, I do think this is a running back that has the potential to, in the second half of the season, be a 3-down workhorse. While yes, in a very bad offense, he has receiving upside. He has the size. He has the athleticism. Maybe I'm biased. Hook 'em horns. I'm rooting for our guy. Now, going over to our next few players, Najee Harris will be our next option at 22. Najee has gotten worse every single season of his NFL career. This Pittsburgh Steelers offense has a change with offensive coordinator where Arthur Smith is coming over. Bijan didn't do anything with Smith, but anyway, that's besides the point. You have Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. The issue with Najee is he's had the volume. He has just looked bad at every single opportunity. He's been inefficient. Sports books are telling us this is a bottom 10 offense in the NFL. I kind of believe them. Jaylen Warren has been more efficient every single opportunity he's gotten. Now, of course, I'm expecting Najee Harris to be the starter, and I think we have to rank Najee as of so. I just realistically don't know what the upside is for Najee Harris unless Jaylen Warren gets injured. Zach Moss is our next guy. Zach Moss, Chase Brown are both very interesting players in that we can say these are two options that project out where they could have a 3-down workload in one of the best offenses in the NFL. I personally don't think Moss is some phenomenal talent. Obviously, he looked very good in small stretches in Indy. I personally just have not been drafting a lot of the Cincinnati running backs, but at the end of the day, if you look at the data, it kind of tells you that you want to be taking running backs in very good offenses. That's probably what Zach Moss is. So even if I don't think he's great, we have to be mixing him in. If you look at where he's going currently in ESPN drafts, he's going at running back 31 with an ADP of 105, where there, even if I don't think he's a phenomenal talent, just based off how many points are going to be scored in Cincinnati, you need to aggressively target him. Zamir White will be our next guy at 24. Zamir White looks like the locked and loaded starter in Las Vegas. At least that's what's being told. But right now the Raiders project out to be the 6th worst offense in the NFL. And with Zamir White, he's not going to have a ton of receiving upside, right? I mean, I can sit here and I can say, oh, Jonathan Brooks is going to be at a bad offense, but we can look at the receiving role that Jonathan Brooks had at Texas and say, oh, okay, maybe Jonathan Brooks gives you 3 receptions to 30 receiving yards a game. I don't know if that's a possibility here for Zamir White. At least we never saw him catch the ball at Georgia. We haven't seen him catch the ball at the NFL level. So even though he looks like he's going to be the starter, a starting running back that's not going to catch the football in a pretty bad offense, probably not someone I'm super excited about. Jaylen Warren will be our next guy here. If you are looking at Jaylen Warren, he's been more efficient on a per touch perspective over Najee Harris. The question is, what does this coaching staff decide to do? How do they decide to split this backfield? Which I personally just don't know. James Conner here. James Conner will be ranked much, much higher at the beginning of the season than he is now. Whenever I put out my week 1 running back rankings, I am telling you right now that James Conner is going to be probably a mid RB2. He's probably going to be around running back 18. So obviously we're ranking James Conner a lot lower here than what you would expect from the early season. Now, with that being said, with James Conner, this is a situation in which I believe you are going to have to be worried about the Trey Benson boogeyman on your back all season. I think Conner could crush at the beginning portion of the season. Benson will probably continue to expand his role as the year goes on. As of week 1, it looks like James Conner is the solidified starter. It looks like Benson's not really going to get a shot outside of a James Conner injury, which has been known to happen. If your league is one which you can make trades frequently, I wouldn't mind at all going out there and pushing James Conner a little bit higher than this. But it really does kind of just come down to your format. Now, going over to our next guy, DeAndre Swift, I think this Chicago Bears offense is going to be pretty good. But with DeAndre Swift, he's gotten worse every single season over the past 3 years. With Swift, as it stands today, you have Khalil Herbert, you have Roschon Johnson there. Now, obviously, I'm expecting DeAndre Swift to be the starter. I have Swift ranked ahead of both those other guys. But that's not to say that those other running backs won't have a role at all. And if you're expecting them to have a role in the slightest, DeAndre Swift, with limited competition in Philly last year, wasn't able to get the job done in a much better offense. I don't know what the checkdown rate is going to look like for Caleb Williams. I think this may end up impacting things a lot. Where if you look at Caleb had a significant amount of rushing touchdowns at USC. Rushing yards, rushing attempts, not necessarily there. If you think Caleb Williams gets to the NFL level and he transitions more so to a pocket passing option at quarterback, and he's not vulturing rushing touchdowns from the running backs here, you should probably move DeAndre Swift a little bit higher than this. DeAndre Swift should probably be ahead of Zach Moss, probably ahead of Jahmyr White, probably ahead of Jaylen Warren in PPR formats. I just personally don't know if Caleb's going to be stealing rushing touchdowns. It possibly has a lower checkdown rate. So for that reason, I'm going to be a little more hesitant on pretty much all the Bears running backs. I will say the positive with DeAndre Swift is we've seen him in the past be able to catch the ball. And also the man got freaking paid this offseason. Now, Tony Pollard will be our next guy. Right now, sportsbooks are projecting out the Titans to have a bottom 5 offense in the NFL. And every single interview with this coaching staff at training camp, all they are saying is, we want to air it out. 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 The completely new identity in Tennessee, where it sounds like they don't really have much interest whatsoever in pulling the Derrick Henry. We're going to run it and play good defense. Tony Pollard was very inefficient, wasn't able to get the job done in the highest scoring offense in the NFL last year. Now transitioning over to a bottom 5 offense, pretty hard to project. Raheem Mostert will be our next guy at 29. Now, Mostert is a very, very difficult player to rank. If you are drafting on Underdog, I think Mostert's intriguing because there will be touchdowns scored in this backfield and you won't have to predict when they are coming. So you can potentially go through and you can potentially draft Mostert and then just randomly, whenever he scores a touchdown, he'll slide in your starting lineup. You don't have to worry about it. But in your regular redraft league from a PPR perspective, which is what all these rankings are made for. They're not made for best ball. They're made for your regular league. Raheem Mostert will have no target volume at all in this backfield. Raheem Mostert will be in a committee not only with Achane, but potentially Jalen Wright may be stealing touches as well. So my issue is in a PPR format where all these other running backs in this range will catch the ball and Raheem Mostert won't, where Mostert is the second fiddle in possibly a 3-man committee, it becomes very difficult to know when the touchdowns will come because he's going to be touchdown reliant. The touchdown should be there. So like I said, if you're drafting on Underdog, go for him. But because he will be in that committee, I think it will possibly be pretty tough to figure out when the touchdowns are coming for your regular league. Non-PPR format, move them up a lot higher than this because touchdowns are the primary scoring things in non-PPR formats. But in a PPR league, then obviously it's going to be a spot where you kind of need the target volume. Brian Robinson will be our next guy at 30. With Brian Robinson, it's going to be a running back that you have to compete with rushing touchdowns with Jaden Daniels, and you have to compete for targets with Austin Eckler. Should be a lower scoring offense overall as well. Non-PPR format, I think you move Brian Robinson up a tad. Full PPR league, I'm comfortable with him here. Going over to our next guy, Trey Benson is a great example of a player that I think it matters the league of where you are going to draft him. I personally have drafted a lot of Trey Benson in Underdog best ball tournaments like Best Ball Mania, where it's a $25 buy-in, $1.5 million for first place, where all that really matters is points in weeks 15, 16, 17 for that playoff tournament. And I think Trey Benson has a massive ceiling for those final 3 weeks. But in your regular redraft league, where you're having to submit starting lineups and you're having to work the waiver wire, by selecting Trey Benson, what you are pretty much committing yourself to is you're committing yourself to throwing him on the bottom end of your bench, clogging up a roster spot, and limiting the amount of waiver wire moves that you're able to make. So I think Benson, great pick in best ball where you're trying to optimize for the final 3 weeks and the players that have the highest ceiling at the end of the season. I think he is a solid pick if you have very deep benches and there's not a lot on the waiver wire, so you're not going to be super tempted to keep on churning. But if you're in a regular redraft league where you have a very shallow bench, where you're going to be working the waiver wire a ton at the beginning of the season, you probably don't want to be taking Benson because you're not going to be able to start him, and he will be clogging a roster spot for you. So really understanding your format and understanding the profile of these guys, I think is going to be critical to winning leagues this season. I think Benson's a great example of that. And of course, I forgot to announce this as well. Just to let you know, if you are on Underdog Fantasy, we have a special Flock Fantasy tournament dropping for everybody. Could not be more pumped. I'll be streaming it every single night, of course, so hope you're drafting in it with us. Link in the description comment section. But anyway, let's move over to Devin Singletary. With Singletary, he goes from a very good offense with CJ Stroud to what projects to be a bottom 5 offense in the NFL with Daniel Jones. He goes to a situation where he is the unquestioned starter. Tyron Jones is the backup, who is a 25-year-old rookie. You heard that right. I don't know how that math adds up, but he will be 25 this season, and he is a rookie. And not much competition, but the thing is Saquon Barkley had no competition in this same offense. And like I said, I know I'm an idiot. I get things wrong all the time, but I am willing to go out on a limb and I'm willing to say I think Saquon Barkley is a better running back than Devin Singletary. So with that being said, if Barkley wasn't able to get it done in New York, I am not super confident about Singletary. Now, Javonte will be our next guy. Now, Javonte, we've had as a faller. The reason being this coaching staff a couple of weeks ago, I want to say a week or two ago at this point, they came out and they said, the running backs here are great. We have Estime, we have Jaleel, Javonte and Samaje Perine competing for a roster spot. And you go, whoa. Javonte, the guy that's supposed to be the starting running back here, he's competing with Samaje Perine for a roster spot. I'm not going to be panicking and moving Javonte down to like RB3 for the Broncos. I still have Javonte as a starter here. I think he has the highest ceiling. I think he has the size to be a 3-down player. I think he has the receiving upside, but it's supposed to be a very bad offense. It's most likely a committee based off what this coaching staff is saying. So I'm not super excited about taking him. Now, Gus Edwards will be our next guy. If you're playing in a non-PPR format, move Edwards up. All right. He's going to be touchdown reliant. He's not going to have any target volume. It's an offense that wants to run the ball. It's just, I don't know. I don't think Gus Edwards is that good. I know you have Greg Roman over here. I know you have the continuity with this coaching staff. If I pull up ESPN ADP right now, some running backs that I'd probably rather have Gus Edwards over. Like Blake Corum's going ahead of Gus Edwards. Probably give me Gus Edwards. The thing is, I just don't know what the ceiling is because he doesn't have the receiving role. So I think you can draft Gus Edwards as like a running back 3, running back 4, and he can be a running back 2 in fantasy, and that's great. Where it probably makes the most sense to draft Gus Edwards is if you get into your draft and all of a sudden you got a phenomenal wide receiver values in the first few rounds. Say round 1, you ended up going Justin Jefferson. Round 2, you went Puka Nacua. Then you're like, oh my gosh, I have Sam Laporta available to me in round 3. You go Sam Laporta round 3, go, oh my gosh, I have Jalen Hurts available to me in round 4. You go Jalen Hurts in round 4, and you all of a sudden find yourself with a 0 RB build. I think Edwards like a good example of a player that you can take, start at the beginning of the season, and then just churn your waiver wire and hope that you can hit on another running back off of waivers and find the next Kyren Williams. So I think he's more like a stopgap for 0 RB teams that need production at the beginning of the year. Now, Nick Chubb, obviously the exact opposite of that. Nick Chubb giving you nothing at the beginning of the year. Very similar to what we were talking about, like with Trey Benson. I'm drafting a lot of Nick Chubb in underdog tournaments right now where we are chasing, massive prizes, trying to have the highest ceiling possible in weeks 15, 16, 17. In your regular redraft league, do not do that. Do not take a bunch of Nick Chubb because it looks like Nick Chubb's not going to be ready for the start of the season. Where you can take him is if he goes on the PUP and you're able to go ahead, you're able to throw him on the IR in your league, and you do not have to waste the bench spot on him, take Nick Chubb. Decent offense, Hall of Fame level running back. I don't know if it's too aggressive saying that. A phenomenal RB, one of the most efficient running backs in NFL history. But if you have to take Nick Chubb and with your league settings, you're not able to put him on the IR and you have a shallow bench and you're just going to be rostering him on your bench, he's going to limit too much your ability to make waiver wire moves where it probably does not make sense taking him. Now, going over to our next guy, we will be looking at Ezekiel Elliott here at RB 36. I'm going to let you know right now, if Dallas does not make a play for a running back, Zeke will slowly but surely be climbing up these rankings. Like, honestly, I should probably have Zeke over Trey Benson. So this is version 1 of our rankings. I'm going to be sending out the updated draft guide. I'll be posting it on flockfantasy.com every single week. I'll be sending out the updated rankings and draft guide every single week for anybody who used code FLOCK on Underdog in 2024. The next update, Zeke probably needs to be higher than this. He'd be like the perfect guy on a 0 RB build to go ahead, take as your running back 2. You know he's going to have a role in a very good offense at the beginning of the season. Going into his age 29 year where he has more active touches than any other running back by far. I don't necessarily know what the ceiling's like, but the floor is going to be very high. You have a role in a good offense, so you know you can start him at the beginning of the season, and maybe you can hit off someone off waivers. So I probably need to move Zeke higher than this as we look at this. I was just kind of thinking in the back of my mind, it makes so much sense for this team to go trade for Khalil Herbert. Our next guy will be Austin Eckler. With Eckler, very, very serious concerns. If you're in your regular redraft league, I probably do not recommend drafting Austin Eckler. Just taking a peek over at ESPN. I know a lot of people draft on ESPN, so we are using that. Austin Eckler currently is the running back 32, which obviously much cheaper than he was in years past. If you go and look at Underdog, on the other hand, Austin Eckler's running back 41. So if I was in my regular redraft league and I have to take him to running back 30, I'm not taking him. If I'm in an Underdog draft and I get him in the 40s, yes, I've been drafting him there. I will admit it. But we can say a couple different things. One, you just look at Austin Eckler last year. You look at his top end speed. He looked completely washed. Don't blame the guy. He's 29 years old. Phenomenal season. Phenomenal story. Undrafted free agent to an elite player in fantasy year in and year out. Set his family up for life. I mean, obviously, Eckler, phenomenal story. But he looks washed at this point. He's going to a significantly worse offense. He's going to a situation where you have a rushing quarterback who's probably not going to check the ball down a ton. And Austin Eckler's bread and butter is just drawing targets out of the backfield. So it's not a good fit. He's probably going to be losing red zone work to Brian Robinson. Like I said, running back 37, I think is fair for him. Now, going over to our next spot, Chase Brown. I don't think Chase Brown's that good, but I don't think Zach Moss is that good either, and I think there'll be a lot of points scored in Cincinnati. So it doesn't matter what I think. Probably I need to go ahead and I need to mix them in. Going over and looking at your regular redraft league at the moment, Chase Brown's running back 43 there. And Chase Brown, and really all these running backs at the bottom, are perfect examples of guys that you want to be rostering on your bench going into the season. Because hypothetically, you take Chase Brown in one of the last rounds of your draft in August. What happens in September when this coaching staff comes out and says, yeah, I mean, it was been a great camp battle, but we've decided to go with Chase Brown as the starter. All of a sudden, you have a starting running back for one of the best offenses in the NFL. Whereas if you were to go like with Tyler Lockett with one of your last picks, what could potentially change with that situation? All of a sudden, double Tyler Lockett's value? Nothing. So specifically with your redraft league, well, you'll have access to the waiver wire and we're going to be making moves. I like taking these guys like Chase Brown, Tajee Spears, Jerome Ford, Zach Charbonnet, Blake Corum. I love loading up on as many of these running backs that we can at the very bottom end, because you take Charbonnet and then Kenneth Walker tears an ACL in a preseason game. All of a sudden, with one of your last picks, you just got a top 12 running back. Hypothetically, instead, say you go and take Tyler Lockett. DK Metcalf tears his ACL in a preseason game. Tyler Lockett goes from being the wide receiver 48 to the wide receiver 30. You know what I mean? It doesn't really matter. So I would definitely be rostering as many of these running backs at the very bottom end of these rankings as possible going into the season, just because I think that's where actually you have the upside in drafts. But I think that's all I have for you. Really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day. And like I said, the updated rankings and draft guide will be live every single day on every single week we're going to update on flogfantasy.com. And also for anybody who signed up to Underdog Fantasy with code FLOCK in 2024 and made at least a $10 deposit on that account, whatever email address you have associated, you are going to be getting an email of our updated draft guide and rankings every single week until the season starts. So be on the lookout for that. And last but not least, come to the Flock meetup August 22nd, Austin, Texas, flockfantasy.store. Get your tickets. Should be a ton of fun. I'm going to be there. A ton of other fantasy football YouTubers going to be there. Looking forward to hanging out with you and meeting you. But thank you again. Really do appreciate it. And I will be live tonight, the day you're watching this video, no matter when it is. I'll be drafting teams, and I hope I can draft against you then.